In a world where nature often dictates a harsh survival of the fittest, one baby monkey defied the odds by refusing to leave the side of a dying eagle. This remarkable bond between predator and prey unveils a heartwarming tale of compassion that transcends instinct and fear. As we explore this extraordinary encounter, prepare to witness a touching display of loyalty that will challenge everything you think you know about the animal kingdom. How far will love and friendship go, even in the face of death? Join us as we dive into this unforgettable story of unwavering devotion. High above the sprawling savanna, where the golden sun painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, a majestic eagle once ruled the skies with unmatched power and grace. She was a force of nature, a predator feared by every creature below. For years, she soared effortlessly through the clouds, her massive wings catching the thermals with precision, her piercing eyes scanning the earth for any sign of movement. She was unstoppable. She was invincible. She was the undisputed queen of the skies. But one fateful day, everything changed in a single, catastrophic instant. A violent collision with a raging storm, with winds so fierce they seemed to tear the very fabric of the sky apart, sent her spiraling downward in a chaotic dance of feathers and desperation. Her powerful wings, once her greatest strength, no longer obeyed her commands. They flapped uselessly against the howling gale. She tumbled through the air, helpless and terrified, watching the ground rush up to meet her with terrifying speed. She crashed hard against the rocky terrain with a force that echoed across the valley. Her body hit the unforgiving earth with a sickening thud. Bones cracking, feathers torn and scattered like leaves in the wind. Her reign as the sky's sovereign was abruptly, devastatingly shattered in that single moment of impact. For days she lay there, broken, bleeding, and utterly alone. The mighty predator had become the prey. Every breath was pure agony, each one a painful reminder of her mortality. Every moment that passed brought her closer to the inevitable end. Vultures circled overhead, waiting. Jackals prowled in the distance, sensing weakness. She was surrounded by death, and she knew it. Then came the moment no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted. A small baby monkey, barely more than a handful of soft fur and innocent curiosity, stumbled upon the dying eagle. This tiny creature should have been absolutely terrified. Every fiber of his being, every instinct carved into his DNA by millions of years of evolution, screamed at him to run, to flee from the predator that could have devoured him in a single strike without effort or hesitation. But something extraordinary happened in that moment. Something that defied every law of nature, every rule of survival, every principle of the animal kingdom. Instead of running, the baby monkey sat down beside her. He didn't attack. He didn't scavenge. He simply stayed. His small eyes locked onto hers. And in that connection, something profound stirred between them. A recognition that transcended species, that went beyond predator and prey. But what the eagle did next would change everything about this unlikely pair's destiny. The baby monkey remained perfectly still, his small chest rising and falling with cautious breaths. His fur, a rich chocolate brown, rustled slightly in the warm savanna breeze as he processed what his eyes were seeing. He had never been this close to an eagle before, had never dared to venture into the territory of such a fearsome predator. His mother had warned him countless times about the dangers lurking above, about the sharp talons that could pierce through flesh like daggers, about the piercing eyes that could spot the slightest movement from miles away across the endless plains. She had told him stories designed to frighten him into obedience, tales of monkeys who had strayed too far and never returned. Yet here he was, defying every warning, defying every instinct, drawn by something he couldn't quite understand. Something that felt deeper than fear, more powerful than survival. The eagle's breathing was shallow and labored, each inhalation a struggle that seemed to drain what little strength remained in her battered body. Her golden eyes, once filled with fierce determination and predatory intelligence that had struck terror into the hearts of countless creatures, now flickered weakly with confusion, pain, and something that almost resembled hope. She had spent her entire life as the hunter, the aggressor, the one in complete control of every situation. She had never experienced vulnerability like this helplessness, this dependence on another creature. Her powerful body was racked with agony from every angle. Her wings lay useless at her sides. Her talons, once instruments of precision and death, could barely twitch. She braced herself, every muscle tensed, waiting for the monkey to strike, to tear at her flesh with his sharp teeth, to finish what the merciless storm had started. But the monkey did something that defied all logic, all evolutionary programming, all natural law. He reached out one tiny hand, barely larger than a butterfly, and gently touched her wing. Not with aggression or hunger, not with the intention to harm or to feast, but with a tenderness that seemed impossible from such a small, insignificant creature. His touch was light, almost reverent, as if he somehow understood the profound depth of her suffering, as if he could feel her pain as though it were his own. The eagle flinched at first, her muscles tensing violently, her body preparing to defend itself with the last reserves of strength she possessed. But the monkey's touch carried no malice, no predatory hunger. It carried only compassion, pure, unconditional, and utterly transformative. The eagle's defensive posture slowly began to relax. She realized in that moment that this tiny creature meant her no harm. From the distance, carried on the wind across the vast savanna, the baby monkey's troop called out to him, urgent, demanding sounds that echoed through the acacia trees and across the rocky terrain. His mother's voice pierced through the cacophony of other voices, a desperate, primal plea for him to return to the safety of the group, to abandon this foolish mission and come home where he belonged. The other monkeys chattered and screeched in agreement, their warnings growing more frantic with each passing moment. They didn't understand. How could they? They saw only a predator, a threat, a creature that should be avoided at all costs, a living embodiment of danger. They couldn't comprehend what their young one was doing, couldn't fathom why he would choose to stay beside a dying eagle instead of fleeing to safety. The monkey looked back toward his family, his small face conflicted, torn between the primal urge to obey the calls of his kind, calls that were written into his very DNA, and the inexplicable, magnetic pull he felt toward the dying eagle. For a long moment, he hesitated, frozen in indecision. His small body trembled with the weight of the decision before him, a decision that would define who he was and what he believed in. His mother's calls grew more desperate. The troops' warnings became more insistent. They were preparing to move on, to journey to safer grounds, and they were calling one final time for him to join them. But then the monkey turned back to the eagle, and he stayed. He made his choice. He chose compassion over safety. He chose loyalty over survival instinct. As the hours passed, transforming into days, something truly remarkable began to unfold between these two unlikely companions. The monkey started to groom the eagle's feathers with infinite patience and dedication, carefully removing debris, dried blood, and parasites with his nimble, intelligent fingers. He worked methodically, understanding somehow that this care was essential to her healing. He brought her water by cupping his small hands and allowing her to drink deeply, quenching her thirst and providing her with the sustenance she desperately needed. He foraged for food, berries that were soft enough for her injured state, insects rich in nutrients, small morsels that he would carefully place within her reach. He sat beside her through the scorching heat of the day, using his own small body to provide shade from the relentless sun, protecting her skin from burning further. He stayed with her through the cold, lonely darkness of night, his warmth a comfort against the chill that descended upon the savannah, his presence a reassurance that she was not alone. The eagle, in turn, began to lower her guard completely. Her breathing became less panicked, more steady and rhythmic. Her eyes, which had held such fierce intensity and predatory focus, began to soften as they gazed upon this tiny creature who had chosen to stay by her side when he could have run. She realized, perhaps for the first time in her entire life, what it truly meant to be cared for, to be valued not for what you could do, not for your strength or your prowess as a hunter, but simply for existing, for being alive, for being worthy of love. Days turned into a routine that became their shared reality. The monkey would leave briefly each morning to forage, to find food and water, but always with the intention of returning. He would bring back whatever he could find and share it with the eagle. He would sit beside her and tell her stories in his own language of chirps and gestures, animated movements and expressive facial expressions, stories only she could understand, stories of his life before this moment, of his family, of his dreams and fears. The eagle would listen intently, her powerful head resting near his small frame. Two creatures separated by species, but united by an invisible bond that neither could explain. A connection that transcended the natural order of things. Other predators began to circle with increasing frequency. Jackals drawn by the scent of weakness and easy prey. Hyenas sensing an opportunity for an effortless meal. Lions passing through the territory and investigating the commotion. But the baby monkey, though small and seemingly defenseless against these formidable foes, stood guard with unwavering determination. He would screech at the top of his lungs and jump up and down, making himself appear larger than he actually was, putting his own body directly between the eagle and danger. He was willing to risk his own life, to sacrifice himself if necessary, to protect her. His courage was extraordinary, his loyalty absolute. One particularly harrowing night, a pack of wild dogs approached, their eyes glowing in the darkness, their hunger palpable in the air. The monkey positioned himself in front of the eagle, his small body shaking with fear, but his resolve unwavering. He screamed and jumped and threw rocks, doing everything in his power to drive them away. The eagle, though still weakened, managed to spread her wings slightly and create a protective barrier. Together, this unlikely pair held their ground against the encroaching darkness and danger. What happened next would reveal just how deep this connection truly ran and would test the limits of their devotion to one another. 2 weeks had passed since the baby monkey first found the wounded eagle lying broken and bleeding on the rocky savanna floor. The savanna's relentless sun had marked the passage of time on both their bodies in profound ways. The monkey's fur had grown darker from constant exposure to the elements, his small frame more muscular and defined from the endless labor of caring for his companion, his movements more confident and purposeful. The eagle's wounds had begun to show unmistakable signs of healing, though she remained stubbornly unable to fly, her wings still too weak to lift her body into the air. Her feathers, once matted and crusted with dried blood and debris, now gleamed with a renewed luster and vitality, thanks to the monkey's meticulous, tireless grooming. Yet despite the obvious physical improvements and the visible progress toward recovery, a new and unexpected challenge emerged on the horizon, one that neither of them could have anticipated, one that would test the very foundation of everything they had built together. The eagle's strength was returning with each passing day, growing exponentially as her body healed and her muscles regained their former power. But with this returning strength came an unwelcome awakening of her predatory instincts, ancient drives that had been dormant during her period of weakness and vulnerability. One morning, as the sun climbed higher into the sky and the temperature began to rise, the monkey was gathering berries from a nearby bush, carefully selecting the ripest and sweetest ones to bring back to his companion. A small bird, a vibrant creature with brilliant blue and yellow plumage, suddenly landed on a rock just a few feet away, completely unaware of the danger that lurked so close. The eagle's eyes locked onto the bird with the intensity of 1,000 suns burning in the desert sky. Her entire body went rigid, her muscles tensed with predatory precision. Her breathing quickened, becoming shallow and rapid. For a moment, she was no longer the wounded, dependent creature who had learned compassion and gentleness through suffering. She was the hunter once more, a force of nature responding to millions of years of evolutionary programming that screamed at her primitive brain to strike, to kill, to feed, to satisfy the hunger that was beginning to gnaw at her recovering body. The monkey noticed the change immediately, his keen senses attuned to every subtle shift in her demeanor. He saw the predatory gleam return to her golden eyes, a cold, calculating intensity that he had never seen directed at him, but that he recognized nonetheless. He observed the subtle shift in her body language, the way her muscles coiled like springs, the way her talons extended and retracted rhythmically, the way her head tilted to track the bird's every movement. He understood with crystalline clarity what was happening. The eagle was healing, which meant her nature, her true nature as an apex predator, as a creature designed by millions of years of evolution to hunt and kill, was reasserting itself with increasing urgency. And he was terrified. Not for the bird, though he felt sympathy for its plight, but for what this meant for their bond, for their friendship, for everything they had built together. For the first time since their connection began in that fateful moment when the monkey chose to stay beside the dying eagle, doubt crept into the monkey's heart like a poison seeping through water. Was this bond real? Or had he simply been delaying the inevitable, postponing a tragedy that was always destined to occur? Had he been fooling himself all this time, thinking that an eagle could truly change, that a predator could become something other than what nature intended? What millions of years of evolution had programmed into her very cells? He stood frozen in place, his small body trembling, watching as the eagle's muscles coiled tighter and tighter, preparing to pounce with the lethal precision that had made her the undisputed queen of the skies. But then something extraordinary happened. Something that would change the trajectory of their entire story. The eagle paused. Her body went still. She looked at the small bird with its brilliant plumage, then slowly turned her head to look at the monkey standing a short distance away. In her eyes, a battle of epic proportions raged. The primal urge to hunt, to feed, to satisfy the hunger of her recovering body, warring against the newfound capacity for compassion and restraint that the monkey had awakened within her through weeks of unconditional care and love. For what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only seconds, the outcome hung suspended in perfect balance, teetering on the knife's edge between two possible futures. The bird chirped nervously, its instincts screaming at it that danger was near, that death hovered just inches away. The monkey held his breath, afraid to move, afraid even to blink, as if any sudden motion might tip the scales in the wrong direction. The eagle's body trembled with the effort of restraint, every muscle quivering as she fought against instincts that were written into her DNA, that were as fundamental to her being as breathing or flight. And then the eagle turned away. She closed her eyes with visible effort and forced her body to relax, muscle by muscle, fiber by fiber. It took every ounce of willpower she possessed, every last reserve of strength and determination. It required her to override millions of years of evolutionary programming, to deny the fundamental nature of what she was. But she did it. She accomplished what seemed impossible. She chose compassion over hunger. She chose the bond she had formed over the call of her predatory nature. She chose love over survival instinct. The monkey rushed to her side without hesitation, understanding immediately and profoundly what she had sacrificed in that moment. He wrapped his small arms around her muscular neck in an embrace, and for the first time, the eagle didn't flinch or pull away. She accepted his comfort, his affection, his love with an openness that surprised them both. She lowered her head and allowed him to hold her, to offer solace for the internal struggle she had just endured. Tears, actual, physical tears, began to flow from her golden eyes, streaming down her powerful face like rain on parched earth. She had never experienced emotion like this before, had never known that such a choice was possible, had never understood that sacrifice and love could be more powerful than instinct and hunger. That night, as they sat together under the vast, glittering canopy of stars that stretched across the African sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet, something profound and irreversible shifted between them. The monkey began to teach the eagle about his world in ways he had never attempted before, about the plants that healed wounds and soothed pain, about the water sources that never ran dry even during the harshest droughts, about the safe places to rest and shelter from storms, about the dangerous territories controlled by aggressive predators that should be avoided at all costs. In return, the eagle began to teach the monkey about her world, about the thermals that carried creatures high into the sky, about the patterns of the winds and how to read them, about the beauty of seeing the world from above, about the freedom that came with flight. Days turned into weeks with remarkable speed, and weeks began to transform into months. The eagle's wings grew noticeably stronger with each passing day, her muscles rebuilding themselves, her coordination improving. She would practice flying, starting with short bursts of a few seconds at first, circling low above the ground where the monkey could still see her, could still track her movements. With each flight, she stayed in the air a little longer, soared a little higher, ventured a little farther from their home. The monkey watched from below with a mixture of emotions, his heart swelling with pride at her recovery, and something else. A bittersweet awareness that the time was approaching when the eagle would be strong enough to leave him behind, when she would no longer need him, when she might choose to return to her old life in the skies. The seasons began to change. The dry season gave way to the rainy season, transforming the landscape from golden and brown to lush and green. The acacia trees burst forth with new growth. The savanna came alive with the sounds of migrating herds and nesting birds. And through it all, the eagle's strength continued to grow, her wings becoming more powerful with each passing day. One morning, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson and amber, casting long shadows across the awakening savanna, the eagle attempted something she hadn't tried since the terrible storm that had brought them together. She stood on a high outcropping of rock, the wind whipping through her feathers. She spread her massive wings wide, wings that had once seemed broken beyond repair, catching the warm thermals that rose from the earth below. She flapped once, the sound like thunder echoing across the valley. She flapped twice, her body lifting slightly off the ground, She flapped 3 times, and then she was airborne, her powerful wings carrying her up, up, up into the vast expanse of sky that had once been her undisputed domain, the realm where she had reigned supreme. The monkey watched from below, shading his eyes against the brilliant sun with his small hand. His small body trembled with conflicting emotions that threatened to tear him apart. Joy that she had healed completely, that she had recovered from injuries that should have been fatal. Pride that she could fly again, that she had reclaimed the ability that defined her very essence. But also heartbreak. Profound, aching, devastating heartbreak, because he knew with absolute certainty what this meant. The eagle was free now. She could leave whenever she wanted. She could return to her old life, to the skies where she belonged, to the freedom and power and majesty that only flight could provide. And why would she stay with a small monkey when she could soar among the clouds, when she could hunt and explore and experience the world from heights he could never reach? The eagle climbed higher and higher, becoming smaller and smaller against the vastness of the sky. The monkey's heart began to break as he watched her disappear into the clouds. He had always known this day would come, had tried to prepare himself for it. But no amount of preparation could have readied him for the actual pain of watching her leave. But then something happened that the monkey never expected, something that defied his darkest fears. The eagle circled back. She descended from the sky, her wings spread wide like a parachute, her body silhouetted against the brilliant sun. She descended lower and lower until she was back within the monkey's line of sight. She landed directly beside him with a soft thud, her powerful wings folding gracefully against her body. She pressed her head gently against his small body, her massive form dwarfing him completely, yet conveying tenderness and devotion. In that single gesture was an answer to the unspoken question that had been tormenting the monkey's heart. She had chosen to stay. Despite her freedom, despite her ability to fly, despite the call of the skies and the freedom of the open air. She had chosen him. She had chosen their bond. She had chosen love. The monkey's eyes filled with tears of joy and relief so profound that his entire body shook with the force of his emotion. He understood in that moment with absolute clarity that their bond had transcended the physical realm entirely. It was no longer about dependency or survival, no longer about one creature needing another for basic sustenance or protection. It was about choice, conscious, deliberate, repeated choice. It was about love in its purest, most unconditional form. From that day forward, the eagle and the monkey became inseparable companions, partners in every sense of the word. The eagle would fly during the day, soaring through the skies with renewed joy and freedom, hunting for food and exploring territories she had never seen before, experiencing the world in ways that only flight could provide. But she would always return before nightfall to the place where her small friend waited, to the rocky outcropping that had become their home, to the creature who had saved her life and transformed her soul. The monkey would forage and play with the creatures of the savannah, interacting with his own kind and exploring the world on the ground. But he would always save a portion of his findings for the eagle, would always keep watch for her return, would always greet her with joy and affection. They had created something entirely new, a partnership that defied every law of nature and logic, a friendship that transcended species and instinct and evolutionary programming. They had become living proof that love could overcome any obstacle, that compassion could transform even the most predatory of creatures, that connection could bridge any divide. Other animals began to notice this unusual pair with increasing frequency. Word spread across the savannah like wildfire about the eagle and the monkey, who had formed an unbreakable bond. Some creatures marveled at it with wonder and awe. Others were confused by it, unable to comprehend how such a friendship could exist. But all of them recognized it for what it truly was: a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of genuine connection, and the transformative nature of unconditional love. Mothers would point them out to their young, using their story as an example of what was possible when creatures looked beyond fear and instinct. But their story was far from over. Greater challenges awaited them on the horizon, trials that would test their bond in ways they could never have imagined, dangers that would force them to fight not just for each other, but for their very survival. 3 months had passed since the eagle first took flight again, since that pivotal morning when the monkey's heart had nearly shattered watching her ascend into the sky, only to soar back down and choose to stay by his side. 3 months of perfect harmony, of a bond that seemed unbreakable, of days filled with joy and nights filled with contentment. The savannah had settled into a rhythm with the two companions at its heart, a rhythm that would soon be violently disrupted by forces neither of them could have anticipated or prepared for. The eagle had given their partnership a name in her own language of calls and gestures, a name that roughly translated to "two hearts, one sky," a phrase that captured the essence of their connection perfectly. The monkey, in turn, had created a series of chirps and movements that expressed the same sentiment with equal eloquence: unity, devotion, eternal connection, a bond that transcended the boundaries of species and nature itself. They had become legendary across the savannah, spoken of in whispered conversations between creatures of all species, from the smallest insects to the largest herbivores. Even the lions, those mighty kings of the grasslands with their fearsome manes and devastating power, had begun to respect their bond, choosing to leave them undisturbed whenever they encountered the unusual pair. The hyenas, known for their cunning and aggression, would part ways when they saw the eagle and monkey approaching. The leopards, solitary hunters of the night, would actually change their patrol routes to avoid the companions. But on a particular afternoon in late spring, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon with agonizing slowness, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and crimson, something fundamental changed in the air itself. The monkey felt it first, a subtle shift in the wind that made the fine hairs on his body stand on end, a heaviness that seemed to press down on the savannah like an invisible weight, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. He looked up at the sky and saw what the eagle was already acutely aware of: dark clouds gathering on the horizon with alarming speed, moving with an ominous purpose and determination that spoke unmistakably of danger and destruction to come. The clouds were not the typical white and gray cumulus formations that brought gentle afternoon rains to nourish the savannah. These were towering cumulonimbus clouds, rising to tremendous heights, their tops flattened by the jet streams high in the atmosphere. They swirled with colors that ranged from deep gray to an almost greenish-black hue, a coloration that experienced creatures of the savannah recognized as a sign of extreme danger. The clouds moved with an unnatural speed, driven by wind patterns that suggested a storm of unprecedented magnitude. The eagle landed beside the monkey with an urgency that was palpable, her body tense with concern and apprehension. She had experienced many storms in her long life, countless tempests that had tested her flying abilities, storms that had forced her to seek shelter, storms that had challenged her survival instincts. But this felt fundamentally different. This felt unprecedented and terrifying. The clouds were darker than any she had ever seen, swirling with an intensity that suggested something catastrophic was approaching, something that would test the limits of their endurance and survival. She communicated her worry to the monkey through a series of urgent calls and gestures, her body language conveying alarm and urgency with crystalline clarity. Her wings fluttered nervously. Her head turned repeatedly toward the approaching storm. Her vocalizations became increasingly frantic, each sound layered with meaning and warning. The monkey understood her perfectly. They had learned to communicate with such precision over the months of their companionship that words, in the traditional sense, were almost unnecessary between them. The monkey understood immediately that they needed to find shelter, and they needed to find it quickly before the full force of the storm descended upon them. Together, they began to move through the savannah with purposeful determination, searching desperately for a place that could provide adequate protection from whatever apocalyptic tempest was coming their way. The wind began to pick up with noticeable acceleration, carrying with it the distinctive scent of rain and electricity, that sharp, ozone-tinged smell that preceded severe thunderstorms. The temperature dropped noticeably in a matter of minutes, plummeting from the warm afternoon heat to something cool and almost uncomfortable. The other animals, sensing the approaching danger with their own evolved instincts, began to flee in all directions, creating a mass exodus of creatures seeking safety. Zebras galloped frantically across the plains, their stripes blurring with speed. Wildebeest herds moved in coordinated masses, their hooves thundering against the earth. Antelopes bounded through the grass with incredible agility, their long legs carrying them swiftly toward distant, rocky outcroppings. Birds took flight in massive flocks, their wings creating a sound like rushing water as they sought higher ground. Even the insects seemed to sense the danger, disappearing into crevices and underground burrows. The entire ecosystem was responding to the threat, with millions of years of evolutionary programming, guiding each creature to safety. The eagle's sharp eyes scanned the landscape with desperate intensity, searching for shelter among the rocky terrain that dotted the savannah. Her keen vision allowed her to see details that the monkey could not perceive. The subtle shadows that indicated caves, the darker areas that suggested overhanging rocks or natural shelters. And then she spotted it. A deep cave carved into the side of a rocky ridge by centuries of water erosion. A natural sanctuary that seemed almost perfectly designed for their current need. The cave entrance was partially concealed behind a cluster of acacia trees, their thorny branches creating an additional layer of protection. The opening was large enough to accommodate both of them comfortably, with a narrow entrance that would provide excellent protection from the wind and rain. Together, they began to move toward the cave with increasing urgency, racing against time itself. The monkey scrambled up the rocky terrain with surprising agility, born from months of living in this environment, his small feet finding purchase on surfaces that seemed impossibly steep and treacherous. His tail whipped behind him for balance as he bounded from rock to rock, with the grace of a creature born to these lands. The eagle flew low, staying close to her companion, unwilling to be separated even for the brief moments it took to reach safety. Her powerful wings beat in steady rhythm, keeping pace with the monkey's frantic scramble up the hillside. They moved as one unit, two creatures functioning with a coordination that seemed to defy the fact that they were different species with vastly different capabilities. They had barely made it inside the cave, the monkey's small body diving into the darkness while the eagle folded her wings and squeezed through the entrance. When the storm hit with a force that shook the very earth beneath them with a violence that was almost incomprehensible, lightning split the sky into jagged pieces of white-hot fury. Bolts so thick and so frequent that they seemed to form a continuous web of electrical energy. Thunder roared like 1,000 angry beasts, the sound so loud and so close that it seemed to vibrate through their very bones, rattling their teeth and making their hearts race with primal fear. Rain fell in sheets so thick and so heavy that visibility dropped to almost nothing, reducing the world beyond the cave entrance to a gray blur of water and wind. The wind howled through the savannah like a living creature possessed by rage and malice, a force of nature that seemed determined to destroy everything in its path. Trees that had stood for decades were uprooted as if they were mere saplings, their massive root systems torn from the earth. Rocks the size of small boulders were scattered in all directions like toys discarded by a petulant child. The very landscape seemed to be transforming before their eyes, reshaped by the raw power of the storm into something unrecognizable. The monkey pressed himself against the eagle's warm body, finding comfort and security in her presence, drawing strength from their connection. The eagle, in turn, wrapped her wings around him protectively, creating a cocoon of safety and warmth in the midst of the chaos and destruction raging outside. Her massive wings, which had been instruments of predatory power in her previous life, now served as a blanket of protection, shielding the small monkey from the psychological terror of the storm. They sat together in the darkness of the cave, listening to the fury of the tempest outside, knowing with absolute certainty that they were safe together, that as long as they had each other, they could weather any storm, literal or metaphorical. The monkey's small body trembled against the eagle's side, not from cold but from the overwhelming sensory experience of the storm. The sounds were deafening, the vibrations almost unbearable. But with each moment that passed, he found himself becoming calmer, his racing heartbeat gradually slowing as he focused on the steady, reassuring presence of his companion. The eagle's breathing was steady and rhythmic. Her body relaxed despite the chaos outside, her very presence communicating a message of safety and security. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The storm raged on with unrelenting intensity, showing no signs of abating or losing power. If anything, it seemed to be intensifying as the night deepened, the lightning becoming more frequent, the thunder more deafening, the wind more violent. The monkey drifted in and out of sleep, lulled by the rhythmic sound of rain hammering against the rocks outside and the steady beating of the eagle's heart beneath his small head. His dreams were vivid and surreal, filled with images of their life together, of soaring through skies and running across grasslands, of moments of perfect peace and connection. The eagle remained vigilant throughout the long night, never allowing herself to fully relax or sleep. Her keen senses remained alert to any sign of danger, her eyes occasionally opening to scan the darkness of the cave or the chaos outside. Her protective instincts were fully activated, every muscle in her body ready to respond instantly if any threat emerged. She had never felt this way before. This overwhelming need to protect another creature. This fierce determination to keep her companion safe, no matter what the cost. This willingness to sacrifice her own safety for his well-being. It was a transformation that seemed to redefine her very nature, turning her from a solitary predator into a devoted guardian. As the night deepened further, the monkey began to tell stories to the eagle, his voice soft and soothing despite the chaos and violence raging outside their sanctuary. He spoke of his childhood in the trees, of his mother and his siblings, of the games they used to play in the branches high above the ground, of the safety and comfort of the troop. He told her about the day he first saw her falling from the sky, about the moment when fear and compassion collided within his heart, about the decision he made to stay with her instead of returning to his troop. He told her about his dreams for their future together, about the places he wanted to explore with her, about the adventures they would have, about the life they would build. The eagle listened intently, her golden eyes reflecting the occasional flashes of lightning that illuminated the cave's interior in brilliant white bursts. She understood his words not through language in the traditional sense, but through the emotion that underlay them, through the vibration of his voice and the meaning conveyed in his gestures and body language. Every story he told was a gift, a piece of his heart offered to her, a continuation of the bond they had been building since that first moment when he chose compassion over fear. She responded in kind, sharing her own memories through a series of calls and gestures that conveyed meaning with surprising clarity. She told him, in her own language, about soaring through endless skies, about hunting in the golden light of dawn when the world seemed full of possibility, about the loneliness that had defined so much of her life before meeting him, about the emptiness that had haunted her despite her freedom and power. She communicated to him the joy she had discovered through their connection, the fulfillment that came from being cared for and valued, the transformation that had occurred within her soul. As dawn began to break over the horizon, the storm gradually began to subside. The rain lessened from a torrential downpour to a steady drizzle, then to scattered drops. The thunder grew more distant, the sound rolling away toward the distant mountains. The lightning became less frequent, the brilliant flashes becoming fewer and farther between. The wind began to calm, its violent howling reducing to a gentle breeze that carried the fresh scent of rain-washed earth. The monkey and eagle ventured out of their cave carefully, stepping into the transformed landscape to survey the damage wrought by the tempest. The savanna had been fundamentally altered. Trees that had stood for decades lay uprooted across the landscape, their massive trunks creating barriers and obstacles where none had existed before. Rocks had been scattered in all directions, creating a chaotic maze of stone and debris. The ground was saturated with water, creating temporary streams and small ponds where none had existed before, transforming the dry savanna into something resembling a wetland ecosystem. The devastation was almost incomprehensible. Entire sections of forest had been leveled. The grasslands were flattened in places, the vegetation pressed down by the force of the wind. Small ravines had been carved by the torrential water flow. The landscape they had known for the past 3 months had been transformed into something almost unrecognizable, a world remade by the raw power of nature. But as they emerged from the cave and began to explore the transformed landscape, they noticed something else. Something that made the eagle's blood run cold and sent a chill of dread through the monkey's entire body. In the distance, approaching through the devastated landscape with purposeful determination, was a sight that filled them both with profound and immediate dread. A massive pride of lions, at least 20 of them, perhaps more, was moving through the savanna with clear purpose and deadly intent. They were hunting, and they had picked up a scent. The pride was larger than any they had encountered before. A gathering of predators that suggested something significant had drawn them together. These were not casual hunters engaged in routine hunting behavior. This was a coordinated effort, a planned assault by creatures driven by hunger and desperation. The eagle's keen eyesight allowed her to see what the monkey could not yet perceive with his more limited vision. The lions were injured, many of them bearing fresh wounds from flying debris or collapsed trees, from being struck by the storm's fury. Several limped noticeably, their movements hampered by pain and injury. Others bore deep gashes across their bodies, evidence of encounters with sharp objects or each other. They were hungry and angry, driven to desperation by the storm that had disrupted their hunting patterns and left them without food. And they were heading directly toward the cave where the eagle and monkey had taken shelter, following a scent trail that led them inexorably toward their location. The eagle turned to the monkey, her eyes conveying urgent warning with crystalline clarity. They needed to leave, and they needed to leave immediately. But leaving meant venturing into the open. Savannah, leaving, meant exposing themselves to the lion's view. Leaving meant putting themselves in direct danger from creatures that were far larger and more powerful than either of them individually. Yet staying in the cave meant being trapped, cornered with no escape route, forced to face the pride in a confined space where the eagle couldn't fly and the monkey couldn't climb. The monkey looked at the eagle, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. A communication that transcended words or gestures, a connection that had grown so deep that they could almost read each other's thoughts. They had faced challenges before, had overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. They had learned to trust each other completely, to work as a team, to combine their unique abilities in ways that created something greater than the sum of their parts. They had proven that love and connection could overcome the barriers of nature and instinct. But this challenge was different. This was not about healing or compassion or the transformation of a predatory nature. This was about survival, about facing a threat that was immediate and deadly, about fighting for their very lives against creatures that were specifically designed by nature to hunt and kill. The eagle spread her wings wide, her powerful feathers catching the wind, and the monkey climbed onto her back with practiced ease, gripping tightly to the base of her wings, where feathers were thick and strong and could support his weight. His small fingers found secure purchase in the dense plumage. His tail wrapped around her body for additional stability. Together, they moved toward the entrance of the cave, preparing to face whatever dangers awaited them in the storm-ravaged savanna beyond. The first lion appeared at the edge of the clearing, a massive male with a mane that was matted and bedraggled from the storm, his eyes wild with hunger and pain and predatory intent. His muscles rippled beneath scarred skin as he surveyed the landscape, his powerful body tense and ready to strike. He roared, a sound that echoed across the landscape like thunder, a vocalization that conveyed dominance and hunger and the promise of death. His roar was answered by the roars of his pride mates, a chorus of predatory voices that seemed to surround the cave from all directions. The hunt had begun. More lions emerged from behind the devastated landscape, forming a loose circle around the cave entrance. They moved with the coordination of creatures that had hunted together for years, each member of the pride understanding their role in the coordinated assault. Some moved to cut off escape routes. Others positioned themselves for optimal striking distance. The pride was executing a hunting strategy that had been refined through countless generations of predators. The eagle and monkey exchanged one final look, a moment of perfect understanding and absolute commitment. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. They would not be separated. They would not abandon each other. And if this was to be their final stand, they would make it one that would be remembered across the savanna for generations to come. In the moments that followed, the eagle and monkey would discover capabilities within themselves that they never knew existed, would demonstrate a level of courage and coordination that would defy the very laws of nature, and would prove once and for all that the bond between them was more powerful than any force on earth. The moment stretched like taffy pulled by invisible hands, suspended in time between heartbeats, between one breath and the next, between life and death. The eagle and monkey stood at the mouth of their cave sanctuary, facing a semicircle of predators whose combined weight and muscle mass dwarfed them by orders of magnitude, so vast that the comparison seemed almost absurd. 23 lions. The monkey's keen counting ability registered with precision born from months of learning to assess his environment. Though his mind struggled to process the reality of the threat before them with any sense of calm or rationality. Some of the lions bore fresh wounds from the storm, deep lacerations that bled slowly, broken claws where they had gripped stone or debris, singed fur where lightning had struck close enough to char their coats with electrical fury. Their hunger was palpable, a living thing that seemed to emanate from their bodies in waves of predatory intent so powerful that the monkey could almost taste it in the air. These were not well-fed predators engaged in casual hunting. These were desperate creatures, driven by the gnawing emptiness of their bellies, by the primal need to sustain their lives and the lives of their offspring. The largest lion, the one whose roar had first shattered the post-storm silence like glass struck by a hammer, took a deliberate step forward. His massive frame seemed to dwarf even his pridemates, his shoulders rippling with muscle beneath scarred and weathered skin that bore the marks of countless previous battles. His mane, though matted and damaged by the storm, still conveyed the unmistakable authority of a pride leader, a creature who had survived countless battles and emerged victorious from each one. His eyes, a piercing amber color that seemed to glow with inner fire, locked onto the eagle and monkey with the intensity of a laser beam, calculating distances and angles with mathematical precision, assessing the threat level of his prey with the refined accuracy of a creature whose survival had always depended on correct predatory judgment. The lion's body language was eloquent in its simplicity. Easy prey. His posture seemed to communicate to his assembled pridemates with absolute certainty. A bird with a broken wing and a monkey with nowhere to run. This will be quick. This will be easy. This will be a feast. But the lion was catastrophically wrong, though he could not have known it. He didn't know that the eagle's wing was no longer broken, that she had been flying for months with increasing strength and confidence, that she was now at the absolute peak of her physical condition. Her muscles toned and powerful, her reflexes sharp as a blade. He didn't know that the monkey possessed an intelligence that surpassed most creatures on the savannah, that his brain had evolved to solve complex problems and adapt to challenging situations with remarkable speed and creativity. He didn't know that the monkey could strategize and plan with a sophistication that rivaled the lion's own tactical thinking. Most importantly, he didn't know the depth of the bond between these two creatures, the way they had learned to move as a single organism with two bodies, the way they had developed a communication system so refined that they could understand each other's intentions with barely a glance or gesture. He didn't know that this bond had transformed both of them into something more than they had been individually, that together they possessed capabilities that neither could achieve alone. The eagle's muscles tensed beneath the monkey's small form, her powerful wings drawing tight against her body in preparation for explosive action. She could feel his heartbeat racing against her back with the rapid rhythm of fear and adrenaline, could sense his terror at the magnitude of the threat before them, but she could also sense his resolve. He was not panicking. He was not trying to flee toward the cave to hide. He was not attempting to abandon her in favor of his own survival. He was committed to facing this challenge with her, whatever the outcome might be, accepting death itself if that was what fate had in store for them. That knowledge filled her with a courage that transcended her individual fear, that elevated her beyond the simple survival instincts that had guided her for so many years. She was no longer just an eagle fighting for her life. She was a guardian, a protector, a companion. She was fighting for something greater than herself. The lion took another deliberate step forward, his massive paws making barely a sound as they contacted the earth, his body moving with the fluid grace of a creature that had perfected the art of predatory stalking over decades of life. The entire pride seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the signal to attack, anticipating the moment when their leader would give the command that would unleash their combined fury upon their prey. The eagle made her decision in that instant, a split-second calculation that would determine the course of events to follow. She would not wait to be hunted. She would not cower or hide or attempt to barricade herself within the cave. She would not adopt a defensive posture and hope that the lions would eventually lose interest. She would take the initiative, would seize control of the encounter, would transform from prey into aggressor. With a cry that echoed across the savannah with the force of a thunderclap, a sound that was part eagle screech of raw fury, part defiant challenge to the predators before her, part primal expression of her determination to survive. She launched herself forward with explosive power. Her powerful wings beat with tremendous force, each stroke of her feathers generating lift and forward momentum that propelled her body toward the assembled lions with shocking speed and violence. The monkey clung to her back with all his considerable strength, his small fingers gripping the dense feathering at the base of her wings with desperate intensity, his tail wrapping around her body for additional stability and security. He had anticipated this move. They had discussed it during the long night on their rocky perch. But experiencing it was far more intense and terrifying than he had imagined. The assembled lions, expecting prey to flee in panic toward the rocky terrain or attempt to hide within the cave, found themselves facing an aggressor instead. Their predatory instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, were suddenly confronted with a situation that fell outside their normal hunting paradigm. Prey did not attack. Prey ran or hid or fought defensively. Prey did not charge directly at a pride of lions with apparent suicidal intent. The lead lion barely had time to react before the eagle was upon him. Her talons, which had evolved over millions of years of predatory refinement to pierce the tough hides of prey animals with surgical precision, raked across his face with devastating accuracy and force. She didn't try to kill him. She was far too intelligent for such a futile effort against a creature that outweighed her by more than 500 pounds. But she did inflict damage with calculated precision. Blood sprayed across his mane in arterial jets as 3 of her talons found their marks with perfect accuracy, leaving deep gouges across his left cheek and forehead that immediately began to bleed profusely. The lion's roar of pain and fury was so loud that it seemed to shake the very earth beneath their feet, a vocalization that conveyed both his physical agony and his profound shock at being wounded by prey. His massive paw, each claw as long as the monkey's fingers, swiped at the eagle with enough force to have crushed her skull had it connected. But she was already moving, her wings carrying her upward and to the side, with a grace and agility that no creature of her size should have possessed. The monkey, feeling the sudden movement through his entire body, adjusted his grip and weight distribution instantly, with the practiced coordination that months of flying together had developed, shifting his center of gravity to maintain their equilibrium and prevent them from tumbling from the air. The lion's claw passed through the space where they had been only milliseconds before, the wind from its passage ruffling the eagle's feathers. She banked sharply to the right, climbing higher into the air with powerful strokes of her wings, gaining altitude that would give her a strategic advantage in the encounter to come. The monkey, looking down from their elevated position as they climbed, immediately understood what the eagle was planning through their refined communication system. The terrain around them, devastated by the storm's terrible fury, suddenly became their greatest asset rather than their greatest liability. Fallen trees, some as thick as a lion's body, created barriers and obstacles that would impede the predator's movement. Scattered rocks of various sizes provided additional hazards. Water-filled depressions created treacherous terrain that could twist an ankle or cause a creature to lose footing. The landscape had been transformed into a maze of obstacles that would disadvantage the lion's bulk and power, while favoring the eagle's agility and the monkey's intelligence. The eagle had recognized what the monkey was thinking through their months of practiced connection. They couldn't win a direct confrontation with this pride in open terrain, but they could use the landscape to their advantage, could transform the environment itself into an ally. The eagle descended rapidly, diving toward a section of forest that had been partially flattened by the storm's violence. She wove between the fallen trees with remarkable precision, her wings adjusting constantly and continuously to navigate the chaotic terrain, her body tilting and angling to slip through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. The monkey pressed himself flat against her back, reducing wind resistance, making himself as aerodynamic as possible to help her maneuver through the obstacle course. The lions, attempting to follow through the devastated forest, found themselves constantly impeded by obstacles that their massive bodies couldn't navigate efficiently. Their bulk, which had always been their greatest advantage in hunting, became a terrible liability in this environment. Their massive bodies, built for power and strength rather than agility and precision, were severe disadvantages in this chaotic terrain filled with hidden hazards. One lion, attempting to leap over a particularly large fallen tree trunk that was easily 4 feet in diameter, miscalculated the distance and the height required, and crashed hard into the trunk with bone-jarring force, the impact driving the wind from his lungs with an explosive exhalation. He collapsed to the ground, gasping and wheezing, temporarily incapacitated by the collision. Another lion became hopelessly tangled in vines that had been violently uprooted by the storm, their lengths wrapping around his legs and body like serpents with a mind of their own. He struggled frantically to free himself, thrashing and roaring in frustration and fear, expending tremendous energy in a futile effort to escape the botanical trap. A third lion attempted to navigate a section of ground that concealed a water-filled depression beneath a thin layer of vegetation. His massive weight broke through the deceptive surface, and he plunged into water up to his chest, the shock of the cold and the sudden immersion causing him to roar in surprise and fury. The coordination that had made the pride such effective hunters in open terrain was being systematically negated by the environment. Their superiority in raw power and size meant nothing when they couldn't maneuver effectively or coordinate their movements with precision. But the pride was intelligent, far more intelligent than most creatures gave them credit for, and they were learning and adapting with remarkable speed. The lions began to spread out in a more strategic formation, some attempting to circle around the obstacles and predict where the eagle and monkey would emerge from the devastated forest. Others trying to establish blocking positions that would limit their escape routes. The lead lion, despite his facial wounds that continued to bleed and cloud his vision, was orchestrating the hunt with remarkable tactical sophistication, using his experience and intelligence to counter the eagle and monkey's strategy. The eagle burst out of the forest and immediately began to climb, gaining altitude rapidly as her powerful wings beat in steady rhythm. The monkey could see the lions below them, spreading out in a loose formation that was becoming increasingly sophisticated, trying to anticipate their movements with growing accuracy. They were running out of options and time. They couldn't keep flying forever. The eagle would eventually tire, her muscles would begin to fatigue, her reflexes would slow. They needed to find a way to truly escape, not just evade temporarily. The monkey suddenly chirped urgently, a complex vocalization that conveyed a new idea with perfect clarity to his companion. The eagle, understanding his meaning instantly through the refined communication system they had developed over months of living and fighting together, banked sharply toward a rocky outcropping that rose like a sentinel from the savanna floor, a formation of stone that had been exposed by millions of years of erosion. It was a formation that the eagle could navigate with her wings and her aerial capabilities. But that would be nearly impossible for the lions to climb or traverse. The rocks were steep, some nearly vertical, with surfaces that varied from smooth stone to jagged protrusions that offered uncertain footing. As they approached the rocks, the eagle suddenly changed her angle of ascent, flying nearly vertically up the face of the outcropping with a maneuver that defied the normal laws of aerodynamics. Her wings beat with powerful strokes, carrying them higher and higher with each beat, her body angling against the stone face. The monkey clung to her back with desperate strength. His small body pressed flat against her feathered form, his fingers gripping with such intensity that his knuckles turned white. Lions, following in hot pursuit with determination born of hunger and wounded pride, attempted to scale the rocks using their claws and raw power. But the stone was smooth in places, treacherous in others, offering inconsistent footing and unreliable handholds. One lion managed to climb several meters up the face before losing his grip on a section of smooth stone and tumbling backward, landing hard on the ground below with a sickening thud that drove the air from his lungs. Another lion reached a narrow ledge and attempted to continue climbing, but the angle was too steep, the surface too unstable, the next section of rock offering no handholds or purchase for his claws. He attempted to jump to a higher ledge, but misjudged the distance and fell backward, landing on his back with a force that left him gasping and stunned. A third lion actually managed to climb quite far up the face, his powerful muscles driving him upward despite the difficult terrain. But as he approached the summit, the stone beneath his paws crumbled and shifted, offering no solid support. He slipped and fell, landing hard on a lower ledge, the impact breaking at least one of his ribs with an audible crack. The eagle reached the summit of the outcropping and landed hard, her talons scraping against stone as she came to a halt with a force that sent small stones tumbling down the slope. The monkey immediately dismounted, running to the edge to survey their situation with desperate intensity. Below them, the lions were gathering, some attempting to find routes up the rocks that didn't exist, others simply pacing back and forth in frustrated circles, their predatory instincts thwarted by terrain that they couldn't navigate. But they were not safe yet. The lions were intelligent enough to know that the eagle and monkey couldn't stay on this rock forever. Eventually, they would have to come down. Eventually, they would have to leave their elevated sanctuary. Eventually, they would have to return to ground level. And when they did, the pride would be waiting, patient and hungry, ready to resume their hunt with renewed determination. The eagle moved to stand beside the monkey, her breathing heavy and labored from the exertion of flight and combat. Her body covered in a fine sheen of sweat that glistened in the afternoon sun. Her muscles trembled slightly with fatigue, though her eyes remained alert and focused. The monkey reached out and touched her neck gently, a gesture of comfort and reassurance, his small hand conveying gratitude and affection. They had survived the initial assault, had successfully evaded the immediate threat, had demonstrated a level of coordination and tactical thinking that had surprised even the lions. But the real challenge, the true test of their bond and their will to survive, was just beginning. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the savanna that seemed to stretch for miles, the eagle and monkey sat on their rocky perch, watching the lions below with intense focus. The predators showed no signs of leaving or losing interest in their prey. They had settled into a siege mentality, prepared to wait as long as it took for their prey to make a mistake, to become desperate, to attempt an escape that would leave them vulnerable to attack. The monkey's mind raced with desperate intensity, analyzing their situation with the kind of focus that came only when survival hung in the balance. They had water. There was a small pool that had formed in a depression near the summit of the rocks from the storm's rainfall. Fresh water that would sustain them for days, if necessary. They had some food. The monkey had gathered berries before the storm, storing them in a crevice in the rocks. And there were insects and small creatures living on the rocks that could be caught and eaten if necessary. But these resources were limited, finite, and the lions below showed no signs of giving up their hunt or leaving their vigil. The eagle, meanwhile, was thinking about flight and escape and sacrifice. She could fly away, could abandon the monkey and soar to safety in the skies where no lion could follow, where her superior aerial capabilities would allow her to escape any pursuit. The thought crossed her mind with brutal honesty, a temptation that whispered seductively of survival and freedom and the simple pleasure of continued existence. She could survive this siege. She could escape. She could live. But the moment she considered it seriously, felt the weight of that possibility. She felt the monkey's small hand on her wing, felt the warmth of his body pressed against hers, felt the trust and devotion that radiated from him like heat from a fire. She understood with perfect clarity that leaving him would be a betrayal of everything they had built together, everything they had become to each other. She understood that survival without him would be meaningless, that living without him would be merely existing, going through the motions of life without purpose or joy. She had made her choice months ago when she decided to return from the skies and land beside him after her first successful flight. She had reaffirmed that choice every single day since, in 1,000 small moments of connection and care. She had proven her commitment through actions and sacrifice, and the daily choice to remain by his side. And she would not break that choice now. Not when it mattered most. Not when the stakes were highest. Not when everything they had worked for was on the line. As night fell with the sudden darkness that characterized the African savanna, the lions below settled into a pattern of patrol and rest, some sleeping while others kept watch with the discipline of creatures that had survived by maintaining constant vigilance. The eagle and monkey huddled together on their rocky perch, drawing warmth and comfort from each other's presence. Their bodies pressed close together for maximum heat retention and emotional support. The monkey spoke softly to the eagle throughout the long night, his voice barely above a whisper, telling her stories of his past with vivid detail and emotional honesty. He told her about his childhood in the trees, about the games he had played with his siblings, about the safety and comfort of the troop. He shared memories of his mother, describing her with such affection and clarity that the eagle could almost see her. He expressed his gratitude for every moment they had shared together, for every day of their companionship, for the way she had transformed his life and given it meaning and purpose. The eagle, in turn, shared her own reflections through gentle vocalizations and gestures, through the subtle language they had developed together. She told him, in her own complex language of calls and movements, that she had never known what it meant to truly live until he came into her life. That survival without purpose was just existing, was merely going through the biological processes of breathing and eating and reproducing without any deeper meaning. But with him, she had found purpose and joy and a reason to face each new day with anticipation rather than mere resignation to fate. As the long night wore on, the monkey began to formulate a plan, a desperate strategy that emerged from the combination of his intelligence and the unique capabilities that the eagle possessed. It was risky, perhaps even foolhardy, but it was the only option he could see that might give them a chance at escape, that might allow them to survive this siege and emerge to tell their story. He explained it to the eagle through a series of gestures and vocalizations, outlining the strategy in meticulous detail, describing each step and contingency with precision. The plan involved timing, coordination, and a willingness to take risks that could result in serious injury or death. But it was a plan that might actually work, that had at least a chance of success. The eagle listened carefully, her keen intelligence grasping the concept immediately, understanding the nuances and the risks involved. She asked questions through her vocalizations, seeking clarification on specific points, ensuring that she fully understood what the monkey was proposing. And when she was satisfied that she grasped the plan in its entirety, she vocalized her agreement, her commitment to attempting this desperate gambit. As dawn broke over the horizon with the slow emergence of light that characterized African sunrises, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and amber and rose, the eagle and monkey prepared to execute their desperate plan. The lions below, who had maintained their vigil through the long night with the patience of creatures that understood the value of persistence, sensed the movement on the rocks and immediately became alert. Their predatory instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution and refined by decades of hunting experience, recognized that something significant was about to happen. Their muscles tensed, their eyes focused with laser-like intensity on the rocks above. They sensed that the moment of opportunity was approaching, that their prey was about to make a move that would determine the outcome of this encounter. The lead lion roared, a sound of anticipation and hunger, believing with absolute certainty that his prey was finally about to make the mistake that would lead to their downfall. He was convinced that the eagle and monkey, desperate and exhausted from their siege, would attempt a flight or climb that would leave them vulnerable to attack. But what was about to happen would exceed even the lion's wildest expectations, would demonstrate a level of courage and coordination that would be spoken of across the savannah for generations to come, would prove that the bond between the eagle and monkey was not just about love and companionship, but about the power of two creatures functioning as a single unified force, moving with a synchronization that defied the normal boundaries of nature. The eagle spread her wings wide, the feathers catching the first light of dawn and seeming to glow with inner fire. The monkey took his position on her back, his small body settling into the familiar place that had become his refuge and his home. They moved toward the edge of the rocky outcropping together, looking down at the lions gathered below in their semicircle of predatory intent. The moment of truth had arrived. What happened next would be a maneuver so daring, so perfectly coordinated, so utterly unexpected that it would transform not just the fate of the eagle and monkey, but would ripple through the entire ecosystem of the savannah, changing the way every creature viewed the possibilities of survival, cooperation, and the transformative power of an unbreakable bond.